Welcome back to Between Sessions. My name is Eboni Harris.
And I'm Eliza Rokeen. And we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch.
Thank you for joining us. We kind of got it together. We appreciate y'all for joining us another week. We hope that you have been enjoying the podcast, hoping it's giving you some type of relief during this wonderful time of COVID, and stay at home and quarantine and all those things, all those words that have now become normal conversations.
Isn't that crazy?
It's so weird. I might have said this before, but I talked to so many people, I don't know. But how like every week it's like, so what have you been up to? How have you been? And it's
right. What have you been up to?
No updates. Sitting at my house. I tried this new restaurant. It was really good. They had delivered the food. I had got on a dating app, but then I had got right back off because no.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. We're gonna have to converse about that offline.
About that later. But truly, nothing is going on.
Nothing. There's more of the same.
Yes.
And that is also, we'll say, is a place of privilege to be able to say.
Definitely.
Yes, because we do recognize that not everybody is just bored per se.
Right.
People are being impacted differently. But yeah, it's so wild that our conversations are around face masks and not becoming infected. And I think we talked about this before. I remember growing up and seeing, like in social studies class, and learning about how in other countries, I think at the time they were talking about Japan, and that when people would get sick in Japan, and they just, even with the common cold, they would wear masks. And I just remember thinking, oh, that seems like such a foreign concept.
Right. That's different.
That's kind of cool that people would do that. And then now, you see more and more people wearing masks. I mean,
that's what we do.
Granted, it had to be something as serious as COVID for us to actually take other people into consideration. But yeah, it's so wild. I mean, this is not how I envisioned 2020 back in January.
At all. So it is definitely an adjustment, and but everything is going, and everybody seems to be coping fairly well. Let me just say, the people we interact with, even our clients, they're coping and dealing with it and seeking the help. I think that's really important.
I think something you said in the last session, because this is what I love about what we do. I love about being a therapist. I love about this podcast is that I will get takeaways also from it. And I think it was last session you said about just accepting, right? Just being like, this is just, it's not going to be what it was. And so the sooner you kind of accept that, then you can adjust. And so that's kind of been on my mind. And I think it's been up and down. That's what I'm kind of hearing a lot, and what I'm experiencing a lot. There'll be days where I'm like, yes, I got this and everything's going to be okay. And then there's days where it's like, oh my goodness, I don't got this.
Everything feels so overwhelming. Yeah.
I just need to cry. I just, so it's just been a roller coaster.
Yeah. And I think that's just to be expected of the ups and the downs. And I think sometimes we feel bad when we're having a down moment, because it's like, well, what's the difference? Yesterday was the same as today. Like, what? But I think it just hits you differently.
Yeah.
What's going on? We've kind of talked about this off air, and I've talked to my friends about this. Like, things have been going well for me, and I feel like very uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what this means. I don't know how I'm supposed to move, especially like we talked about, like after this, like what is that? So it's definitely like, you want to be excited, but then it's kind of like, well, it's also a very stressful and a lot of bad things going on. And so it feels kind of bad to be excited.
Yeah.
So
that survivor's guilt, so to speak.
Yep, exactly. So,
and that's been on my mind, because I think, and that may be the next, episode, is it's important that all of us are not in despair. Right? I think it's important for us to not all be in despair. And how can we give ourselves permission if things are going well? We need things to go well for people. We need people out there that can be those encouragers and kind of hold up that hope for us when we can't. So maybe that'll be the next episode.
Yeah. By the way, I was going to say that at the end, but I'll say it now. Next episode is episode 100, by the way.
Really? We've been yapping for 100 episodes?
This is 99, and next time will be 100.
Wow. Okay, well, we got to do something big for next episode.
Right.
Okay.
So today we are going to talk about mental health versus mental illness. Today is the first day of Mental Health Awareness Month.
May Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
It is May. And if there was ever a time that mental health awareness needed to be at the forefront of our minds, I would say it is now.
Right. Definitely. So we wanted to have a conversation just because obviously we talk about, promote, always like very big on mental health. And sometimes people don't know exactly what that means. And sometimes it gets lumped in with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to kind of talk about the differences so that, you can kind of understand when people use those words differently. It's not really something that you use interchangeably. Mm-hmm. They are different things. And along with that, just kind of identifying like, how do I know if I'm just struggling with my mental health or if I may have a mental illness, things like that. So that's where we're going to start this conversation. So do you have any?
Take it away.
Okay, of course. So, I think we could start with kind of defining, and I was like, I guess we could have looked that up. I'm about to do it right now. But we could start by kind of defining mental health versus mental illness. So I'll start with like a lay version or lay person's version of it, and then you can give yours and I'll look up the actual definitions of it.
Okay.
So my understanding of mental health is just it's you as a whole, I guess, as far as your emotional, spiritual, intellectual, all those things, making sure that is healthy. So it's basically how your mind works, and making sure that you're healthy in that regard. When it comes to mental illness, that means that you have symptoms that collectively say that you have some type of disorder or disease of the mind. And so that's when we go into like major depression disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, things like that. Those will be mental illness.
Right. Yep. That's ditto.
That didn't give me enough time to look it up.
Well, what I would add to the mental health piece is you touched on the emotional health, right? Also, so I think part of that is our ability to be able to identify our emotions and our ability to experience our emotions and process our emotions, which I don't think that we give enough consideration to processing our emotions. So we could talk about a little bit about also what does that even mean to be able to process our emotions. But I think for us to be able to have optimal mental health, we have to really have the emotional IQ, so to speak, in what is happening to us emotion-wise, because all of it's all interchangeable. It's all interacting with one another. My thoughts, my emotions, which then impact my physical health. So definitely being able to process our emotions is a big part of that.
Right, definitely. Okay, so I found a definition that seems kind of basically what we're saying, but it's in a succinct way. So mental health is basically your mental well-being. So that includes your emotions, your thoughts and feelings, your ability to solve problems and overcome difficulties, social connectings, and your understanding of the world around you. A mental illness is an illness that affects the way that you think, feel, behave, and interact with others. And there are many different mental illnesses that have different symptoms that impact your life in a different way. And so one of the things that I thought of is even right now, as we're going through this, I think that there may be some, like you may have some experiences that you're not sure if it's a symptom of a mental illness or if this is just a result of what's happening around you. And so it's interesting because I know people, we use words that can be related to a mental illness. Like you might say, I'm depressed, right? And so while you're not saying I have major depression disorder, you might say I'm in a depressed mood, or I might be sad, or things like that. And so I think that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion around like, well, how do I know if I have a mental illness or if I'm just struggling with like taking care of my mental health?
Right. Well, I think so let me take a step back. So I think kind of what you said earlier is that there's different mental illnesses. So and I think within that, there's a different range. So maybe you have so maybe you have major depression, or you have the onset of it. So I think even within the different illnesses, that can range also. So maybe you have some anxiety. I mean, if you are suffering from some anxiety right now, you're not alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it crippling, right? So you may have maybe some of, like you said, some of the symptoms and maybe some of the onset of it, but maybe it's not crippling you. So I think if it's interrupting your day to day, if let's say, for example, you're not just sad, right? Like you're not just having a bad day, you're not just bummed. Let's say you are finding it difficult to meet your day to day responsibilities. Maybe you are at the risk of losing your job because you are not coming through with the projects on time. Then there could be more that's going on to where it falls more into the mental illness, versus I'm just struggling with stress these days and it's, bogging me down.
Right. I think that's a big part of it, is like, how does it impact your day-to-day life? And just the understanding that mental illnesses are just like other diseases or illnesses. There are certain criteria you have to meet to even be diagnosed with that. And so just because you're struggling in certain areas or you're having a bad couple weeks does not mean that you meet all of the criteria.
Right.
And so I think about how often people say, like, I think she's bipolar. I think he's
right.
bipolar. Like, they use that so commonly because one minute their mood is this way, the next minute it changes, which is not a symptom of bipolar at all.
Right.
But because we don't necessarily understand what the actual symptoms are, we're quick to just start calling people whatever, whatever the label is. And so I think that's a big part of it, is just understanding that if you don't meet the criteria, and the criteria often has like a time associated with it, there have to be at least this number of these criteria. It can't just be, I have one of these things, so I have this illness. If it doesn't meet that, then you may not have that illness. And so there's a big difference between that and then the experiences that you may have, where I might, after a death or during this time, like you said, when there's anxiety, you might be experiencing some of those symptoms or having some, that I don't like using symptoms but I guess I'll just go with that. But you might be experiencing some of that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is related to that.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of people shy away from therapy. And that is because a lot of people only associate mental illness with therapy. Right. So, okay, well, I'm not that, I don't have like these major mental illnesses, so I don't need therapy. But that's not the only population that therapy serves. It's, again, how are we preserving our mental health? So maybe you don't have a crippling sort of mental illness, but you're just finding it like really difficult to process your emotions. And maybe it is interrupting your sleep. Maybe you are more irritable. So again, I think that's part of the reason why there is this stigma around therapy, is that people only see the people that actually need to go to therapy are the ones who are just, their day-to-day is almost impossible to get through because of what they're struggling with.
Right. Or the opposite, where it feels like it's only these people that have unlimited resources, that don't have the same skin color as us, that those are the other ones. So it's like, it's one of those extremes, like you're in a mental
hospital. It's a luxury, or extremely
that's necessary in that moment, and not understanding that it can still just, that middle ground is there. And that's typically who we work with, right? It's like we work with people that kind of fall into the, I'm struggling in this area, maybe relationship, sex, whatever, I'm struggling in this area. And so maybe it's not enough for me to have a full diagnosis. Maybe it is, it just depends. But this is the area I need help with. And so can you help me with that? And so I know I don't necessarily work primarily with people that have an illness, but I work with people that want to maintain their mental health.
Yeah, we tend to, and that's the thing. A lot of times, this is why I have so much empathy for clients who are like, okay, I'm going to try out therapy. And then you get it there and you're like, whoa, how do I navigate even finding what I need? Is that when you and I both work in private practice, and the type of model that we have set up for our practice, typically the folks that we work with are very high functioning folks.
Yes.
Right. And so, so yeah, we're going to see a different population versus someone who might work in the hospital, someone who might work at an agency, you're going to find people that maybe it is more difficult for them to function in their day to day. So yeah.
Or even taking like the state insurance or something like that. Yeah. So yeah. And so I think the biggest thing is just understanding that mental health is for everyone, including people that have a mental illness. Having a mental illness, and I say having, not that you are a mental illness, like you're not, like I said, but I'm depressed, so
you're not schizophrenic.
Right, I'm schizophrenic. I'm bipolar. Right. No, you have bipolar disorder. You know. Yeah. So having a mental illness, those people they also take care of their mental health in different ways. And so it may be medication, it may be more intensive therapy, it may just be talk therapy, just like, other people that take care of their mental health. But basically mental health is for everybody.
Right. We have to be tending to it. We have to tend to, just like we have to tend to our physical health, we got to tend to our mental health. It has to be something that's on our radar.
And I think I was about to say, and that's why there is so many different types of professionals, mental health professionals, coaches, all the kind of stuff. Just like there are so many types of doctors, natural pathologists? Did I make that up? So it's different types of people that can help you, because there's different things that you may need help with. And so while Eliza can specialize in trauma, if you have specific things going on there, she would be the person to go to. You wouldn't necessarily come to me for that, because that's not my specialty. And there are people that specialize in family members of people with chronic diseases. Like there are so many specialties. And so typically if you are aware of like, this is where I'm struggling, you can find someone that can help you in that area.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, if you look at it that way, like just like physical health, if I have a pain in my back, I'm not going to go to a foot doctor. It's necessary to have such a diverse group of people that are interested in different areas and want to specialize in those areas, just because it makes it a lot easier. And that's a tip for therapists. I know y'all hear this all the time, but the therapists that are listening, specialize. Make sure you specialize. Yeah. It just makes it easier, right, for people to know you are who I want to work with, and for us to refer to you if we need to.
Right.
It's really hard when you're a general practitioner.
I see everybody.
Right. I mean, you'll get some clients, but it's sometimes hard to even know who.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what other questions did we have? Oh, how do you know how do I know if I need to focus on my mental health, or if it's a mental illness? Like, how do I know that maybe I'm just like slacking with my mental health?
I think a big part of that is what we talked about earlier before, is that you are finding it more and more difficult just to meet your day-to-day responsibilities. And if you find yourself like you've tried all of these ways to self-help, or you've talked to your friends to death, right? Like you've gotten all the advice, you've read all the books, and you're still struggling, then that may be an indicator that you really need to seek out the professional support, the professional help of somebody who specializes in mental health to be able to see, do we need to rule out if there's anything else that may be going on with you? Because a mental illness, more often than not, that's going to be a medical issue also, right? So do we need to rule out that there's any medical issues that might be going on, where we need to have more people on the team to be addressing the medical piece of this?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. And while comparison is not a good thing, comparison is a thief of joy. That's one of my favorite quotes. I think it is important to kind of identify like how other people deal with similar issues. And obviously we all deal with things differently. There's no right or wrong way of dealing with it. But if you notice that things kind of impact you in a completely different way, in a much more intense way, or anything like that, then that would be, maybe I need to just get checked out to see what it is. And like she said, it's kind of like, it's just like going to a doctor. Let's rule out that this is an issue. If it's not, cool, and we can just focus on this. But if it is, then we need to address that as well. So if you do have a mental illness, it's let me take some medication if I need to. Let me make sure I go seek a specialist that specializes in this. Let me do what I need to do to get the help I need to manage this, instead of saying like, well, no, I don't even want to know.
Yeah. And I think another indicator is maybe the comparison is how you used to function before, right? So maybe this is not something that you used to struggle before. Some of these mental illnesses don't, there may be something that you haven't struggled with your whole life, right? There may be an onset of them later on in life, depending on the conditions of what's going on. Like if you're under a tremendous amount of stress and maybe you hadn't been diagnosed with bipolar disorder prior, but you were more susceptible or you were more vulnerable. And again, for a lot of people who come from our communities, our parents or our grandparents or our aunts and our uncles went undiagnosed, right? Or maybe there wasn't this conversation about that there was something else going on. And so you may not even know there's a predisposition for you to develop maybe some of these mental illnesses. And then depending on what's going on in your life, it might be the perfect storm brewing. So if you can compare, like, I didn't struggle like this before, and now all of a sudden I'm finding myself struggling, or I didn't used to have these intrusive thoughts before, but ever since this happened, you know, I'm finding myself more difficult for me to focus or what have you. So that's one thing that you can compare also. How are you functioning today compared to how you were functioning before?
Definitely. And a big part of melanin and mental health is the understanding that minorities, just off the strength of being a minority, deal with more stress in life. Absolutely. Like not even talking about any other aspect of your life, not job, not family, just the strength of having brown skin.
Yeah.
You deal with more stress, you deal with more trauma, you deal with more pressures. Yeah. And so identifying and understanding that sometimes what we consider to be common amongst us is not always normal or healthy. Right. I think that's important as well, because there are some behaviors and even how we talk about, how you say like people go undiagnosed, or how we talk about family members and that type of stuff, how just because this is what we do doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, and doesn't mean that there's not some type of a mental illness, or there isn't a need to like take control of your mental health. Right. So that is a huge reason why we even do what we do as therapists, and specifically with melanin and mental health, is just the understanding of our communities have the most stress and pressure with the least resources and abilities to get access to mental health. So
yeah, and just coming into this world with trauma already in our DNA, you know, the intergenerational trauma. So all of these are just, again, these different sort of ingredients, so to speak, as to why we have to be so on top of monitoring our mental health and getting the information, and what we do, which is really to have these conversations to normalize it, because that's part of why people do shy away from it, is that we don't have the conversations, or just, I know you've mentioned before, like, I hate the idea of stigma, you know, like being related to this. And yet it's there. I love that it's shifting more. You see more and more people, especially right now, you see more and more people actually advocating for people to go to therapy. You've got, you know, some people that maybe never talked about it before, and they're like, go see a therapist. Or you see, like, Beyonce just donated, I don't know how many millions of dollars to, I know Houston was going to get some of it, and there are a couple of other cities to be able to pay for mental health services for people. That. Yeah. I know you stay offline.
I never know anything that's going on. I'm like, give me the highlights. What's going on?
Yeah, I think it was like awesome. 6 million or something like that she was donating for people to be able to receive therapy.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so it's definitely becoming obviously more of the standard and the norm, and not such a secretive or more of an unknown. I feel like that's part of it, is like when it feels like it's not for you and then you don't, because everything's confidential. So I don't even know what the experience is going to be. I don't know when I'm going to, what happens.
People are seeing the value.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so now people are talking about it a lot more, and you get to see the benefits, and you have other people in your life that are experiencing and saying like, no, you need to go talk to somebody because how it helped me. And so I think it would be good for you to have that as well.
It's an exciting time to be able to see that shift, and it's just happened, I would say, within the last few years, because I know not even when I finished school, which was like 7 years ago or something like that, it wasn't as much of this trending conversation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It wasn't like as many hashtags out there of people just really proud to say that they're tending to their mental health. So that's really exciting for us.
Right. So I think we covered, is there anything else that I think I covered everything I wrote down.
No, I think you covered it all. I think, again, just remembering that we're still in the thick of all of this. So it's so interesting to me, like I said, that it's May and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and just understanding we're still in the thick of it. So we're still going through it. I think we're in in for a long run, and that some of the effects that this time and being in quarantine and isolating and just the anxiety of not knowing what is next, I think the effects of it are not going to be fully seen for a while, and the effects that it's having on our mental health. And so I think as we move through this, we have to be continuously having it at the forefront of our mind of how we're tending to it and how we're caring for it, because I think we still are in for I think it's going to take some time for us to really see the full effects that it's going to have on all of us collectively and individually.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds good. I appreciate everybody for joining us and watching. I just had a real big idea. I'm going to say it briefly, but then we'll talk about it off camera. What do we do like for next episode? Maybe we don't have to do it like next week. Maybe we'll skip a week so we can really plan for it. But what if we do like a live, people can come in and be on Zoom and like watch us. I don't know. Y'all let us know what you think. Email us info@Melanin and Mental Health. Write some comments under our social media posts or whatever, and let us know what you think. What do you think about that? We could talk about it. I just it'll be fun. It'll be a lot, but that could be fun.
That could be fun. Yeah. More interactive.
They can kind of ask questions or something like that. I don't know. It was just a random thought as we were talking. And I was like, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's our 100th episode. That might be fun.
It has to be big. Yeah, okay. We have to do we'll talk offline. We will talk about it.
But thank y'all for joining. Make sure you follow us across social media at Melanin and Mental Health, Melanin Health on Twitter. Head over to melaninmentalhealth.com if you want some of our dope merch, like Elisa's shirt, Therapists Need Therapy Too. Therapy is Dope, all of those, as well as if you need to find a therapist, we have people signing up for the listing every single day. So go and check out your city, see if we have any therapists there. If not, let us know and we will try to help find you someone. As well as if you want to check out previous podcasts and all those things, that is at the website. So we will talk to y'all next time. Thank you.
Bye.